The administrative tribunal. I hope you get some understanding about the tribunal because we have studied about tribunal in newspaper, and I hope you know that fact of the tribunals. Tribunal is nothing but it is like a judiciary only, like our Supreme Court and High Court. Tribunal like a court, uh, tribunal like a court only, which is the main aim of the tribunal is to face the disputes and the matters. Now we will discuss some difference between tribunal and judiciary. The High Court and Supreme Court is tribunal is a less formal one. This tribunal can be set up and tribunal can be run or administered is less formal way. And the other hand, judiciary has the formal way. Because there's something called CPC, Civil Procedure Code. The Supreme Court and High Court will have to another to that CPC here and all, but you don't have any structure. If you are approaching any case, that means the Supreme Court or High Court going, that is the procedure for applying. The first you should apply, then the time gap, then you should wait, then you should for legal hearing. Like that, it is a step for us and it will take a long process. So you go for Supreme Court or High Court to get your case resolved. It gets some long time. But since it is a tribunal, it is not for an formal thing. It is just a body. It consists of both administrative and judicial head, and that they will adhere to the dispute between us. And they will give you solutions. It is a less formal thing. So it will take less time only. So within quick time, get some remedy to the problem. So that is the best thing of the tribunal. Thus, tribunal not present in the original text of the Constitution. It has been provided on the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. So brought about the Article 323A and Article 323B deals with recruitment and conditions. The tribunal deals with Article 323A and Article 323B. The Article 323A deals with RC, that means recruitment and conditions. The recruitment and conditions of central and state level. We are getting recruited as IPS, IFS or IAS in the recruitment stage. In there any dispute or any problem, then you can go the tribunal. Article 323A, that is the main concept of tribunals. Article 323A deals with administrative tribunal or public tribunal. And next we will move on Article 323B. Article 323B deals with other tribunals. That means the another of the main difference between the judiciary and tribunals is in judiciary, it is just a general thing, not a specific. But here, every specific like environment, that you have a tribunal. Public service, that you have a tribunal. The environment tribunal have the member of chairman, vice chairman. They have the environmental background. They have good knowledge of environment. So when is approach the environmental dispute, you will get a easy solution. But on the other hand, you go to the Supreme Court, you go to the approach environmental problem, the Supreme Court also. But the Supreme Court judge and the member, they have the knowledge about the environment. Because you studied no the Supreme Court qualification, there is no such qualification. The judge should have some environment, history, geography, and all. It is not mentioned that concept at all. So, if tribunal means it will set for a specific purpose. Like environmental tribunal and public service tribunal, like for employment tribunal, specific purpose on setup. So based on the Article 323A, the Administrative Tribunal Act 1985, Article 323A deals with the Central Administrative Tribunal, State Administrative Tribunal, Joint Administrative Tribunal. That means the Article 323A deals with CAT, SAT, JAT. CAT means Central Administrative Tribunal and SAT means State Administrative Tribunal and the JAT means Joint Administrative Tribunal. The Central Administrative Tribunal, some post in center. CAT means the Central Administrative Tribunal, some post in center. And SAT means the State Administrative Tribunal. The State Administrative Tribunal, some post in state. And the Central Administrative Tribunal, headed in New Delhi, it is the original jurisdictions. And the civilian employees on the Central Administrative Tribunal, which post are Central Civil Service under the Central, and civilian employees of the Defense Force. That means the central employee of the armed force. There are the three posts of Central Administrative Tribunal. The first one, Central Civil Service, and the second one, Civil Service under the Central, and third one, civilian employees of the Defense Force. That means the armed force. These members will come under the jurisdictions of the Central Administrative Tribunal. The another one is the very important, the feudal will not come. The main thing, the Central Administrative Tribunal will not come the post of the first one, armed force, because it has separate military court. Second one, Secretariat Staff of Parliament. And third one, Staff of Supreme Court, that means office of servant of Supreme Court. The Staff of Supreme Court, that means the office of servant of Supreme Court. So it will not come the post of Central Administrative Tribunal. The first one is the military court, separate. The first one is the armed force. That means the because that is the separate civil military court. Second one, Secretariat Staff for Parliament, and third one, Staff of Supreme Court. That means the office of servant of Supreme Court. And the next one is the composition of Central Administrative Tribunal. The Central Administrative Tribunal, as told, multi-members body appointed by the President, like chairman, vice chairman, and members that are appointed by the President. The chairman and vice chairman at the age of 65 years, and the members at the age of 62 years. The chairman, vice chairman, and members, the tenure of 5 years. The chairman and vice chairman, the age of 65, and the members, the age of 62. The chairman, vice chairman, and members, the tenure of 5 years. And they are appointed by the President, whichever is earlier. It consists of both the judicial and administrative official, that is the Central Administrative Tribunal. The Central Administrative Tribunal born by CPC, that means Civil Procedure Code 1908. It functioning the way of natural justice for the two classes. The first one should be judged in own case itself. The cases there, for example, case related to that person who related that case should not hear, that case should not be judge of the case. The next class is legal hearing. That means fair hearing, which means everyone should be here. That is the Central Administrative Tribunal. Next, we will move on at the State Administrative Tribunal. The next, we will move on State Administrative Tribunal. Before one thing, there is a doubt. If you are having some problem within the recruitment of conditions of your post and you're going to tribunal, if you are going to judgment, if you okay with your judgment, okay. If you're not okay with your judgment, can you approach the Supreme Court? Yes, you can definitely approach the Supreme Court. Okay, your Supreme Court or High Court not hearing the jurisdiction, but with you have problem, the recruitment conditions of public service, you can't approach to Supreme Court first here itself. You go to the tribunal first level. If you're not okay with that, then a judgment, go with the Supreme Court or High Court, not have your jurisdiction. You cannot approach the High Court. The Central Administrative Tribunal go the Supreme Court, not to the High Court. Now it is not there because 1997, the Chandrakumar case, Supreme Court told that this restrictions of High Court is unconstitutional, and now you can approach High Court. Also, early thing told you can't approach High Court with the final judgment of Central Administrative Tribunal. You can go to the only the Supreme Court, not High Court. But not after the case, the Supreme Court told that this looks something like unconstitutional and you go to the High Court also. And the State Administrative Tribunal all service under the control of state. The next one, the State Administrative Tribunal is the all services under the control of state. All the members appointed by the president with the consultations of the governor. The State Administrative Tribunal is set up only the state. Is requesting then only the central government set up the State Administrative Tribunal. It is not a permanent body at all. If the state demands, then the central government set up the tribunal. Most of the State Administrative Tribunal present. But Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, it has been abolished. And the next one is Joint Administrative Tribunal. Joint Administrative Tribunal for two or more states. It will be set up both for the state. Joint Administrative Tribunal, it will be set up both for the state. Both states, the common state. And the Central Administrative Tribunal, State Administrative Tribunal, Joint Administrative Tribunal, the members, that means the chairman, vice chairman, and members are appointed by the president. The next we will move on Article 323B. The tribunal set up the other matters. That means all the matters deals with Article 323B. Article 323B deals with the other matters like taxation, industrial issues, foreign exchange, foodstuffs, election for state assembly, rent and tenant. That means the short form is the TIFR. TIFR, T stands for taxation, I stands for industrial issues, F stands for foreign exchange, F stands for foodstuffs, and E stands for elections for state assembly, and the last one R for rent and tenant. Okay. So now move on. The difference between Article 323A and Article 323B. The first one, it was the Article 323A, it was set up a public service. And the Article 323B, it was set up all other matters. The first difference, it was set up a public service, and Article 323B, the other side was set up the other matters, all other matters. And the second difference, the powers with only the parliament. Article 323A, the powers with only the parliament. And the Article 323B, the powers of parliament and state legislature. And the last difference, Article 323A, the Central Administrative Tribunal or the State Administrative Tribunal or Joint Administrative Tribunal on the hierarchy. But the Article 323B at the hierarchy 1. Article 323A, there is no hierarchy. Article 323B, only the hierarchy. And let's move on. The next topic is independent regulatory commissions. The independent regulatory commissions are peculiar to the constitutional setup of the United States of America. They are a progeny, the separations of power and the deep distrust of the Congress in the powers of the American presidency. The need for such commissions was felt on account of the growing industrialization and urbanization of that country during the 19th century, when the government felt an imperative to regulate private economic activities. The first independent regulatory commission set up by the federal government was the Interstate Commerce Commissions in 1887. At present, there are the 11 such commissions in the federal government of USA. There are the 11 commissions of independent regulatory commissions. The first one, the Interstate Commerce Commissions. It was established 1887. And the second one, the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System in 1913. And the third one, the Federal Trade Commission in 1914. And the fourth one, the Federal Communication Commissions in 1934. And fifth one, the Federal Power Commissions in 1930. And the sixth one, the Securities and Exchange Commissions. It was established in 1934. And the National Labor Relations Board in 1935. And the eighth one, the United States Maritime Commissions, 1936. And the ninth one, the Civil Aeronautic Board in 1938 and 1940. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commissions. And the last, the 11th commission is the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And next we will move on the futures of independent regulatory commissions. These commissions are marked by the following features. The first one, the functions of these commissions are a mixed nature. That means administrative, quasi-legislative, and quasi-judicial. They frame rules and regulations. They execute these rules and hear appeals against their own decision. It is on account of the mixed nature of their functions that they have been called the fourth branch of the government, for they do not fit into any of the three traditional branches of the government: legislative, executive, and judicial. And the second one is these commissions are staffed by expert and are relatively small. And the third one, there are collegial in character and consist of a group of men discussing and deciding by majority vote. And the fourth one, they are relatively independent of the chief executive, that is the president. They are neither responsible to him nor report to him. They are set up under a statute passed by the Congress, laying down their constitutions and functions. And the members are appointed by the president with the approval of the Senate. They are not answerable to him. And the overlapping or staggered terms of the members strengthen the independence of the members from the president all the more. The independence of the commissions is not absolute. Firstly, they are controlled by the civil service commissions in personal administration. Secondly, their budget are subject to the review of the Bureau of Budget, which is a staff agency of the American president. Thirdly, their actions are subject to judicial review and can be declared void. That means the judiciary examines their action from three principal aspects: is assuring the use of correct procedure in administrative action, in preventing action in excess of powers conferred by the legislature, and where administrative action depends on a factual record. In making sure that the evidence in the record is sufficient. Finally, they are subject to the control of Congress, which has the power, order, and investigations into their working and operations. The Congress can also amend their constitution and even abolish them, although the last steps have never been taken. There are the nine. Next, we will move on the functions of independent regulatory commissions. There are the 9 functions of independent regulatory commissions. The first one, Interstate Commerce Commission, and the Board of the Governor. Next one, the Board of the Governor of the Federal Reserve System, and third one, the Federal Trade Commission, and the fourth one, the Federal Communication Commission, fifth one, Federal Power Commission, and sixth one, Securities and Exchange Commissions, seventh one, National Labor Relations Board, eighth one, United States Maritime Commissions, and ninth one, the Civil Aeronautic Board. The first one, Interstate Commerce Commission. The main function of these commissions are to develop, coordinate, and preserve a transport system by railway, water, road, and by other means. It has to promote safe, adequate, and efficient transport service and to fix up reasonable charges for the same. It has also to prevent discriminations or unfair competitions among the various agencies of transport. The second one, the Board of the Governors of the Federal Reserve System. The board determines and controls the monetary conditions, credit, and operating policies. All the National Bank and Federal Reserve Bank of the USA are the member of this body and are supervised by the board. And the third one, the Federal Trade Commissions. It has a duty to prevent unfair method of competitions in trade, control false advertisement of food, drugs, etc. The commission safeguard the entire economic system so as to maintain the conditions of free competitive enterprise. The Federal Communication Commissions, the next one. It regulates the interstate and foreign wireless, radio, and television communications. The fifth one, the Federal Power Commission. It was originally set up 1920 as an agency for licensing hydroelectric projects, but was later on recognized as an independent regulatory commission in 1930. The function extends to licensing of hydroelectric projects, transmission and sale of electric energy and natural gas. And the next one, the Securities and Exchange Commissions. The main functions of the commissions is to be protect the interest of the investors against the malpractice in the securities and financial market. And seventh one, National Labor Relations Board. The board was set up by the National Labor Relations Act 1935. It investigates unfair labor practices by the labor union and victimizations of the employees by the employer. And the eighth one, United States Maritime Commissions. It encourages the development and maintenance of the merchants, marine for commerce and national defense. And last one, the Civil Aeronautic Board. The main functions of the commissions are to develop the air transport, prescribe the safety standards, investigate air crashes, assist to develop international transport, etc. The main functions of all these commissions, we firstly set up stands, rules and regulations to govern the behavior of a particular industry. Secondly, they enforce these standards, rules and regulations. And thirdly, they prosecute the defaulters. They regulate the economic activities by three different procedures. By rule making, which means by elaborating and defining the general norms as laid down in the Parents Act. By administrative methods such as licensing, inspections, publicity, etc. And by case decision method, which is used on complaints against the violations of the law or the norms laid down. Let's move on. The next topic is TRAI. That means the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. The Telecom Regulatory Authority of India was set up in order to have a suitable environment for the growth of the telecommunication industry in the country and be a part of global information society. It is a statutory body and regulates the telecommunication sector in the country. And the next one, the structure of TRAI. TRAI shall have, in addition to its chairman, at least 2 full-time members and not more than 2 part members, all appointed by the central government. The members should have special knowledge of or professional experience in telecom, industry, finance, accountancy, law, management, and consumer affairs. Only those senior or retired government officers can be appointed as members who have served for at least 3 years as secretary, the additional secretary to the union or state governments. And next we will move on, Telecom Dispute Settlement Appellate Tribunal. That means TDSAT. Now the regulations of telecom service is to be done by TRAI and the newly set up Telecom Dispute Settlement, the Appellate Tribunal. They will also adjudicate disputes, dispose of appeals, the product interest of service providers and consumers to promote and ensure orderly growth of the telecom sector. The composition of TDSAT is also changed to include the chairman and not more than 2 whole-time members and not more than 2 part-time members to the appointment by the government. The TDSAT has been given the mandate to adjudicate disputes between a licensor and a license, between 2 or more service providers, between a service provider and a group of consumers. And next we will move on the power and functions of TRAI. To recommend the need for and training of introductions of new service, the providers and terms and conditions of the license to a service provider. To ensure technical compatibility in between different service providers and regulate their revenue sharing arrangements. To ensure compliance with term of license and revolutions of the same for non-compliance. And the next functions to lay down and ensure a time period for providing long distance and local distance circuit. And the next one, to facilitate competitions and promote efficiency in operations to promote the growth of telecom service. And next one, to protect consumer interests, the minority quality of service, and inspect equipment used in network and make recommendations about such equipment. And the next one, to maintain a register of interconnect agreement and keep it open for inspection, and to settle dispute among the service providers in this respect. And the next one, to give advice to the government on any matter related to the telecom industry, the levy fees and charges for service, and ensure that universal service obligations are complied with, and to perform any such other administration and the financial functions as may be entrusted to it by the central government. The next topic will move on, the Securities and the Exchange Board of India. That means SEBI. The Securities and the Exchange Board of India is the highest regulatory body with regards to the functioning of the security market, stock exchange, commodities market, etc. in India. SEBI was formed in 1988. The SEBI was formed in 1988 as a non-statutory body. It was made an autonomous and independent regulatory body after the passing of Securities and Exchange Board of India Act 1992 by the Indian Parliament. And the SEBI functions under the Ministry of Finance. SEBI now has statutory powers with regards to regulations of the securities and commodities market in India. And the main objectives of SEBI, it is to facilitate the growth and development of the capital market and to ensure that the interest of investors are protected. The head office of SEBI in Mumbai and the regional office at Kolkata, Ahmedabad, New Delhi, and Chennai. It has local offices in almost all major cities of the country. And next, we'll move on the structure of SEBI. The functions of SEBI are carried out by the board of 9 members, 1 chairman and 8 members. The chairman of SEBI is nominated by central government. The 2 members are nominated by Finance Ministry of India. The Reserve Bank of India nominates 1 member to the SEBI board. The rest of 5 members, that is 3 of them must be full-time, are nominated by the government of India. And next we will move on the authority and powers of SEBI. There are the 3 main powers of SEBI. First one, quasi-judicial. Second one, quasi-executive. And third one, quasi-legislature. First, we will move on the quasi-judicial. SEBI has the authority to deliver judgment related to the fraud and other unethical practices in terms of the securities market. This helps to ensure fairness, transparency, and accountability in the securities market. The second main power is quasi-executive. SEBI is empowered to implement the regulations and judgments made and to take legal actions against the violators. It is also authorized to inspect books of accounts and other documents if it comes across any violence of the regulations. And the third one, quasi-legislative. SEBI reserves the right to frame rules and regulations to protect the interest of the investors. Some of its regulations consist of insider trading regulations, listening obligations, and disclosure requirements. These have been formulated to keep malpractices at bay. Despite the power, the results of SEBI's functions still have to go through the Securities Appellate Tribunal and the Supreme Court of India. And move on the functions of SEBI. The SEBI is primarily set up to protect the interest of investors in the securities market. In the securities market, it promotes the development of the securities market and regulates the business. SEBI provides a platform for stock brokers, sub-brokers, portfolio managers, investment advisors, share transfer agents, bankers, merchant bankers, trustees of trust deeds, registrars, underwriters, and the other associated people to register and regulate work. And it regulates the operations of depositories, the participants, custodians of securities, the foreign portfolio investors, and credit rating agency. It ensures that investors are educated on the intermediaries of securities market. The SEBI takes care of research and development to ensure the securities market is efficient at all times. And let's move on. The next topic is NHRC. That means National Human Rights Commission. NHRC means National Human Rights Commission. The National Human Rights Commission of India, it is independent statutory body established on 12th October 1993. As per provisions of Protections of Human Rights Act 1993, later amended in 2006. NHRC has celebrated its silver jubilee, the 25 years on October 12, 2018. Its headquarters is located in Delhi. It is the watchdog of human rights in the country, that is, the right related to life, liberty, equality, and dignity of the individual guaranteed by Indian Constitution or embodied in the international covenant and enforceable by courts in India. And it was established in conformity with the Paris Principle adopted for the promotions and protections of human rights in Paris and endorsed by the General Assembly of the United Nations of 20th December 1993. And next move on the structure of the commissions. NHRC is a multi-member body which consists of a chairman and 7 other members. But of the 7 members, 3 are ex officio members. The president appoints the chairman and members of NHRC on recommendations of high power committee headed by Prime Minister. The chairman and the members of the NHRC are appointed for 5 years or till the age of 70 years, whichever is earlier. They can be removed only the charges of proved misbehavior or capacity. They can be proved only the charges proved misbehavior or incapacity if proved by any inquiry conducted by the Supreme Court judge. And the commissions also have 5 specialized divisions, that is law divisions, investigation divisions, policy research and program divisions, training divisions, and administrative divisions. The chairman and the member of state commissions are appointed by the governor in consultation with the chief minister, home minister, speaker of legislative assembly, and the leader of the opposition in the state legislative assembly. The next we'll move on the functions and powers of NHRC. NHRC investigates grievance regarding the violence of human rights either suo motu or after receiving a petition. It has the power to interfere in any judicial proceeding involving any allegations of violations of human rights. It can visit any jail or any other institution under the control of the state government to see the living conditions on the inmates and to make recommendations thereon. It can review the safeguard provided under the Constitution or any law for the protections of human rights and can recommend appropriate remedial measures. NHRC undertakes and promotes research in the field of human rights. And the next function, NHRC works to spread the human rights literally among the various sections of society and promotes awareness of the safeguard available for the protections of these rights through the publications, media, seminar, and other means. The Commission takes an independent stance while providing opinion for the protections of human rights within the parlance of the Constitution or in the law of the time being enforced. It has the power of civil court and can grant interim relief. It also has the authority to recommend payment of compensation or damage. And NHRC credibility is duly reflected in large number of complaints received every year and the trust reposed in it by the citizens. It can recommend to both the central and state government to take suitable steps to prevent the violations of human rights. It submits its annual report to the President of India, who causes it to be laid before each House of Parliament. And the next one is the limitations of NHRC. NHRC does not have any mechanism of investigation in majority cases. It asks the concerned central and state government to investigate the case of the violations of human rights. It has been termed as India's teasing illusions by Soli Sorabji, the former Attorney General of India, Soli Sorabji, due to its incapacity to render any practical relief to the aggrieved party. NHRC can only make recommendations without power to enforce the decision. And many times, NHRC is viewed as post-retirement destination for judges and the bureaucrats with political affiliations. Moreover, inadequacy of funds also hamper its working. A large number of grievances go unaddressed because NHRC cannot investigate the complaints registered after 1 year of incident. The government often outrightly reject the recommendations of NHRC, or there is a partial compliance to these recommendations. And state human rights commissions cannot call for information from the national government, which means that they are implicitly denied the power to investigate armed force under national control. The National Human Rights Commission's power related to violations of human rights by the armed force have been largely restricted. Let's move on. The next topic is State Human Rights Commission, SHRC. The State Human Rights Commission, the state government may constitute a body known as the Human Rights Commissions of that state to exercise the powers conferred upon and to perform the functions assigned to a state commission. And the composition of the state human rights commissions. The next one, composition of the state human rights commissions. A state commission is to be composed of the chairman and some members appointed by the governor in the consultations with the chief minister, home minister, speaker, and leader of the opposition in state assembly. The chairman is to be retired judges of the high court. One of the members should be serving or a retired district judge in the state. One member is to be serving judge. or a retired judge of the High Court. The two members are to be activists in the field of human rights. Besides the above member, the commission has its own secretary as well. The chairman or any other member is removable by the president on the charge of proved misbehavior or incapacity after a regular inquiry by the judge of the Supreme Court. They are removal on the grounds as provide for such removal of the members of NHRC as well. And the next move on the functions of SHRC. These functions of the SHRC also inquire suo motu of petitions presented to it by a victim or any person on his into complaint aid. The violations of human rights or abatement thereof, and the negligence in the preventions of such violations by public servant, and intervenes in any proceeding involving an allegations of violation of human rights, but before a court with the approval of such court, and such other functions as it may be considered necessary for the promotions of human rights. The next one is Human Rights Court. One of the objects of the Protections of Human Rights Act 1993, as stated in the preamble of the Act, is the establishment of Human Rights Court at district level. The second Human Rights Court at the district level has a great potential to protect the realized human rights at the grassroots. The Protections of Human Rights Act 1993 provides for establishment arising out the violations of human rights. It provides that the state government may, with the concurrence of the Chief Justice of the High Court, by notification, specify for each district a court session to be a human rights court to try the said offense. The object of establishment of such court at district level is to ensure speedy disposal cases relating to offenses arising out of violations of human rights. The Act refers to the offense arising out of violations of human rights, but it is not defined or explain the meaning of offense arising out of violations of human rights. The Act does not give any clear indications or clarifications as to what type of offense actually ought to be tried by the Human Rights Court. Okay, thank you. The next topic we will discuss the next video lecture. If you have any doubt, we'll ask the Google Classroom comment box. Thank you.